Thank you very much. You guys having a good IBC so far? Oh, you do better. Are you having a good IBC? Yeah. Well, thank you very much for turning up to the Maxon stage. I'm Stephen Emerson. I'm here on behalf of RealFlow, Nik Limited company. They have recently released a plugin that is able to do water inside of Cinema 4D, which is very fast, very, very fluent compared to maybe what some of you guys are used to before. A little bit about myself. I'm a motion graphics generalist. I got into 3D more out of a necessity of looking to learn more and more and more as time has gone on. If anybody has seen my stuff online, at the moment I'm a daily renderer, but we'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. If you guys want to take a wee minute and watch my showreel then, you'll get a good idea.
Okay, ready?
So yeah, that's my reel. You'll see a little bit at the end. So the next question is, what is a daily render? You've seen at the end of my show reel, there was a lot of images, all one after the other. Those are 3D renders, and I've taken it, a little project that a lot of our artists have done to do one piece of art every day for as long as I can stick it really. So what is a daily render? Like I said, one piece of art every day. It could be a photograph. Some people do a photograph a day. Other people do a drawing a day. Some people do an animation a day. My goal was to do a 3D render per day. This is some of the examples then, recently that I've put out. The goal is for speed and to learn things as you progress really as an artist. So this is a brief look at some of these. And of course, they're all done inside of Cinema 4D with some Photoshop or After Effects help. So why do something as crazy as that per day, you know? So well, it teaches discipline, and it has taught me a lot of little nuances and things in Cinema 4D and with all the other plugins that are available. It's for myself personally, it's really more muscle memory. It's allowed me to, repetition is key, you know, and things like that. And then of course, I'm building up a show reel as time's gone on. I suppose this quote it pulled a chord with me a long, long time ago. It's from Air Glass, and this is just a snippet out of the quote. I would encourage you to go look it up. It's only by going through a volume of work, you will close the creative gap, and all your work will be as good as your ambitions. It's paraphrased, but that really hit home with me years and years and years ago. So this is me doing a volume of work to close my creative gap. One of my biggest influences, there are so many of course, is the infamous Beeple. I'm sure a lot of us have seen his work. He is now at 3,420, probably 3,421 consecutive days as of today, which is crazy. So Beeple, Mike Winkleman kind of put me onto this thought, and if he's watching online or at any stage, hi Mike. So this is where we are now. I'm only trying to somehow fit the shoes of the likes of Beeple and Mike and of some others. So how are they done? Well, it's very simple. These are the programs at this moment that I've focused on. Maxon, RealFlow, X Particles, rendered in Octane, Photoshop, and After Effects. And of course, the trick is speed. Whenever these start taking up more than 4 hours of your day, you have to sort of think, I have to work quicker, I have to work smarter. It's a great practice to keep delivering work and things like that. The one we'll be focusing on today is RealFlow. The guys at RealFlow, Victor and Tanya, they've been very, very kind and brought me to show you guys their new Cinema 4D plugin. So if anybody has used RealFlow before, this is the core features of RealFlow, and you'll see yourselves in a moment. We're going to have a go at a live project and have a look and see exactly why it's so quick and why it's so great. This is the starting scene that I would typically use. It's got a stage, 4 lights, and we'll get a little bit more into this later when we look at rendering, but it also has an HDRI which lights up the scene. So this is a great starting point for us. One thing we can do then, and this is the idea that I thought to show you guys today, nice and simple, is let's do some plumbing. Let's create a pipe. If we snap right in and have a look, this is a basic tube, nothing too special. We'll set an inner radius, an outer radius, so a nice simple pipe. It of course needs to have some height, so we'll give it, let's say, 600. Oh. So 600. And of course, it's very boring just as a static pipe, so we can use some of the simple built-in stuff in Cinema, and we have lots of choices, of course, as if anybody that's used Cinema, you know the world's your oyster with this kind of thing. If I click the tube and hit Fit to Parent, we're now automatically ready to start bending this pipe, but hold on a second, it's kind of not doing what we expected to do. At a certain point, we need to tell the tube to have a few more subdivisions on height. And now you can kind of start to see that this looks a little bit more tube-like, or a pipe that you would put into your kitchen or toilet or your bathroom. We need to bear in mind that there'll be water flowing through this. It'll be a simulation of particles that you'll see in a little moment. So we can't go incredibly insane at this stage with the amount of subdivisions. It would, of course, start to get a little bit heavy, naturally, as any, because there'll be thousands and millions of computations going through, as you'll see. So we'll settle on something like 20 subdivisions, and it'll look something like that. So, of course, this pipe is sitting completely wrong. We can't put any water through it as it sits, so we'll have to rotate it. And really, there are many smart ways to work in Cinema, but the simplest is always the best. Let's just rotate it by 90 degrees. Nope, by minus 90. And of course, we still have control to bend the pipe, and it might be worthwhile to rotate the pipe this way. So the reason we rotate it that way is we now still have a great amount of control on the orientation, etc., of the pipe. And one last rotation, just to make sure we're getting this right, is here. Now we can control where the water will flow out of, so we can have water coming in from the top, down to the bottom, and out of the pipe. So if we place this naturally in our scene, just around here, that's one pipe. That's one method of how to bend things in Cinema 4D. Another method, let's grab another tube, and we'll look at another method. We'll do 2 pipes. That sound good? One other method then to bend a pipe, once we have it set up, we'll go 40 on the inside, and I'll show you what is happening. 40 on the inside, and 50 on the outside. Just the same, so they look quite all right. And bear in mind, from my context every day, these kind of tools in Cinema are fantastic for working quickly. So what we would like to do with this is a thing called a Spline Wrap, and you can find it here. This will basically wrap it around a spline once we find a spline. So our splines, of course, are located up here. You have lots of primitive shapes, but one that I think that might work well for us is a Helix. It's just that little bit more of a complicated shape, and you guys will be able to see the possibilities of RealFlow then once it's plumbed through this. So we have our Spline Wrap. Our Spline Wrap is asking, well, which spline would you like to wrap the tube around? We'll simply just drop our Helix in. We don't have to change it from a Helix to anything else. And of course, well, if we go into our main camera, this doesn't look very nice. So let's try and fix this. Our Spline Wrap is being told to wrap on the wrong axis. It's trying to wrap it on the wrong plane. So if we swap this over to Why? And of course, we still have our same problem that we need to give it lots more subdivisions. And you'll see once you start getting up in the numbers, it starts looking a little bit more like we'd like it to look. So 34, well, maybe let's try 50. And that looks maybe a few more. That looks close to what we'd like to achieve. And again, remember, we'll have lots of particles flowing through these, so if we go overboard at this stage, it will bog down our system and we won't have as responsive as a creative process, really, of trying to get this stuff going. So we can move our helix wherever we please, so we can pop this up here. And of course, now we have all of our helix controls, and that will allow the tube to follow the helix exactly where we go. We can rotate it more, and if I come around the side of our shape, you'll see all the extra things. Now, you would need a lot of force to try and plumb some water through that hose. It would be tricky. So we'll come up with a realistic shape that we could pump some water through this. And if we keep going back and back, that is close to a realistic shape. So we'll end up on something like 480. And of course, there is no point for the water. If we want the water to flow in from the top, like I have imagined, we can't obviously work with this. We have to take our helix and rotate this right round, or helix even, there we go, and rotate it right round so that the water can flow into the pipe. So it could be worthwhile to rotate this round. Now, of course, the back of our pipe is hidden. So let's use some of the very unique helix features. This is all quite basic shapes and things, so we can get to change a lot of different settings and have a go at some unique shapes with our helix. If I change the height, you'll see things like this happen, which is maybe what we're after. And then we can change our inner and outer angle. So let's go a little bit bigger, and we'll change our end radius back into the center. And of course, we rotate it back around to make this sit a little better. So now we have a fantastic starting point. It looks a little bit like a pretzel or something that might be edible. So we can tweak a little bit more. And really, you can work as quick or as slow as you like with these processes. Obviously, after a little bit, it's good, to have a little experience and know after. And this is why I do these every day, because then I learn a little bit more, and a little bit more, and it sort of starts to stick in my memory then of what I'd like to come after. So we have our tubes, we have our pipes. We need some water. We need some water particles to start with. So if I just adjust this just a tiny little bit more. There we go. And now we need to align our pipes so that if I go into the top port, this pipe is completely separate to this pipe on that plane. So it would be wise just to have the water flowing at the same depth. So if I take our helix and move it that little bit forward, we now have these on an even plane, which is a little bit easier to work with, or at least know our depth and things like that, so the end result will look that little bit nicer. So let's get some water. We'll go up to our RealFlow, and right from this point on the demonstration, you'll see that this is how easy RealFlow has become. All the core elements of what we're used to in RealFlow in the full application are here. You have all your variants and emitters. You have your daemons, which is to control particles, kill them, twist them, and things like that, morph them, and, well, do quite nasty things to them. I'll be taking a wee look at these tomorrow at 10 a.m., and we'll get a good look at all of these daemons and, well, how nasty can we be to water in the end, really, So our emitters, of course, and I'll tell you guys in case you haven't seen RealFlow as well, all of our emitters run through a fluid, and our fluid will calculate that into a water formation, and then our mesh will wrap around all of the particles to give us what we know physically to be water. So what do we need for this? Well, we need a circle emitter. And of course, if I solo and we have a look at RealFlow just by itself, I'll come out of our camera first. This is RealFlow. It's completely removed from what we're used to RealFlow being. If I hit play, you'll see particles immediately. And of course, it's that fluid that we can pan around in real time around the emitter. There's no simulating yet. You don't have to cache anything yet. It simply works, and it's manipulable, and it just works. So if I take our emitter and go a little higher, I can show you some of the other emitters. So we can go into our emitter settings, and we have circles. there is a cylinder. So it's emitting from all outside shape of the cylinder. We have spheres. We can fill an object. We can use splines. We've also typical squares, things like that. We can change with all the Cinema 4D controls the direction and where we would like this emitter to go. For example, any of these 3D shapes, we could take the cylinder or the sphere, and we could decide to fill the sphere with water. And of course, that is trying to calculate off a filled volume of water. If we break the speed down to 0 and it refreshes, you can see that that is a bunch of particles sitting static. And for me, as a creative guy and doing my daily renders, that I could do lots of things to that. That's so cool. Like, you can really mix it up every day. Then, even with this one RealFlow plugin, the options are endless. So, if we go back to our basic shape, then our circle, we'll need a circle for our pipes, and we'll need to set our speed back to normal. So we're back now, and we have a nice flow of particles. And if we unsolo, this is a little solo switch from Nitroman. It's called Magic Solo. If you guys use cinema, that is a lifesaver. It's pretty cool. So if we go back to our main camera, we have this emitter, and of course it's completely in the wrong location. But for now, I'll take the emitter, and we'll move it just up and to the right. And you can see in real time it's following me. There's no real thought or anything. I can move this anywhere we want. Of course, naturally, when we get right to the end and we mesh it and we want to go to render time, it might slow down a little bit, but here we are being creative, and we're not being hindered at all by, any sort of computer performance issues or anything like that. So this needs to be above our pipe, and of course we'll need 2 of them. So if I come out into the top view, and we try and line up our emitter then over the top of the pipe, so of course that's the inside. Let's pop this across. And I think let's try and guess some sizes and see how well it goes. Yeah, that looks like it'll fit inside. Okay, cool. And back to our main camera. Yeah, that's looking okay, good starting point. Now, we need 2 of these, of course, because we have 2 pipes. We're going to have a simple bend on this one, and then we're going to have a nice swirly bend, something out of Sonic the Hedgehog on the left one. So if I hold control and drag across, just like you're used to in Cinema 4D with any other object, you'll see a second emitter appears on your hierarchy on the right, which is pretty cool. Now, you have a lot of options with how you'd like to split up your fluids. You could have very complex scenes. This, of course, is a little bit of a simpler scene. I will run both emitters through one fluid. For convenience, that means all the calculations in these fluids can also then interact with each other, which is very, very useful. In this example, they're not going to, but just so you guys know, you can have multiple fluids, multiple emitters, multiple meshes, and perhaps it might be the way you'd like to split your scene up. If you're going to give one fluid, say you're going to mix oil and water or something for fire on top of, oil on top of water kind of thing. So if I take our fluid then and make sure that our second fluid is inside of this, our second emitter, is inside this fluid. Now all of a sudden when we play, 2 emitters, 2 fluids, both waiting for me to do some crazy things with them. If I come out of our camera, they're pretty close to lined up, but let's go into our top view again and make sure that our second emitter is lined up. And of course, you never do too well trying to eyeball things, so let's try and get it nailed. That looks pretty close to the center to me. So yeah, let's come out and let's go back to our main camera, pop in here. Now, of course, we don't want to see the top of the emitter. We don't want to see the source, because right at the top, it just won't look like an illusion or anything that we're trying to create. So if I grab both emitters at the same time now and shift them up and out of the scene, they're gone. It's a waterfall from nowhere. So, you'll notice that the emitters are going quite slow. At the moment, they're just particles being told, travel at this speed across this plane, and that's it, simple as. So, we'll have to look at one daemon today, which is quite a vital one. It's the gravity. And if I pop this on, suddenly you'll see the particles flowing quite fast. And you'll notice they get that little bit thinner because they're reacting to real world physics. And of course, at any stage with any of these realistic settings or real world physics, this is what's so cool about motion graphics. You can go in and change any of the gravity settings and the weight and things like that down here, the strength of the gravity. I mean, it's completely unrealistic, but if it creates that thing that you want it to do, or say you're working with syrup and that's just the easier way to make syrup look real for your motion graphics clip, that would be the way to do it. Go in and start tweaking with all of these settings. Now, of course, our next problem is very, very obvious. It's not working with the pipes. So, like any simulation or any other sort of plugin that would deal with simulations, our pipes need to have a collider tag on them. And RealFlow have their own collider tags. It tells the RealFlow particles really that we need to interact. So if we pop that onto the tube, and if I hold control and drag it down onto our other tube, suddenly we have water shooting out of both pipes. And of course I know certainly I want to see the water swirling around this, so let's have a look and see what's happening inside the tube. Two ways we can do this. We could change the display settings for the whole project. But for me, I would like to see the rest of my scene, so I'm going to just add a Cinema 4D tag and a display tag, which is here. And inside here, we can change the display settings for this object and this object only. I want to see lines, so we're seeing through it. And I'm going to change it to isoprams, which cuts down the amount of geometry in the wireframe so we can see quite clearly the water that's going through. And here, let's have a look. There you go, there's two. What do you guys think? You learning something so far? Yeah, no? Are you understanding my accent? just a fact. Well, I said right from the start that this plugin is fast and fluent. There's two simulations running through moderate geometry in pipes and things like that. If I were to come out of my camera, this is by no stretch of the imagination a new laptop. This is a 4-year-old laptop, and I'm able to quite simply pan around while it's simulating and calculating all of its things, and it doesn't think too hard about it. Obviously, when we get to mesh stage and we want to get render quality things, then yeah, of course it'll change a little bit then, because well, render time isn't for creating, this is the creative stage. So at this stage, if we want to stay creative, we can start interacting with these particles a little bit more if we wish. And for example, as well as the real-time thing, if I were to take this bend, and you noticed at the start I was a little bit fussy about how it was set up. Well, now if I bend and move the end of this, it responds in real time as it's simulating. All of the simulations they're just so fluid, so you're not restricted at all by, it's really only in your imagination what you can create then with this. So, for example, if I wanted to decrease the length of the tube that little bit, and we rotate it back around to suit, you can see it's correcting for everything wrong that I've done, and of course it's splashing on the edges and things. Maybe that's the look you want, So you have a lot of options. If I do a few undos, one creative idea would be to start using objects to interact with these. So we could pick any shape at all. Let's try a cone. That's a pretty pointy top shape. If we go into our top view, and we'll try and get this to upset the water or things like that. So if we pop, there's the point at the end, and we come back into the front. And throughout all of this, I'm not stopping the simulation. There's no need to, because it's working so well in real time. So that's touching the tip. Obviously, it's going to need the same RealFlow collider tag to start working. Now, all of a sudden, from our front camera, we might have that little bit more of a creative thing. Because remember, for myself, with my daily renders, this will be a picture. Again, in motion, it might look very, very good if you want to animate it. It doesn't make sense in real life, because now that we have that cone there, we can hide it. It's still responding to the water, but of course, that just might be the little addition that it would make the render look that little bit more alive, rather than if we turn off the cone, it's a single stream of water again. Previous workflows then would have had you going back and forward from the RealFlow full application, which is still very much needed, but it would have you going back and forward with importers and exporters, whereas we're getting the full integration now inside of Cinema 4D with no real difficulty. So we can leave that cone there. I think this tube is feeling a little lonely, so let's give it one as well. We'll pop that down there. And of course it's vastly in the wrong position, so let's drag it up and see how that interacts. So if we come out of our main camera, now of course that's hitting it far too hard, so let's move that down just a little bit. And here comes our water. So cool. Maybe we want that, maybe we don't. We can switch them off at any time. And like I said, this is all in real time, so anything we're looking to do, it's all good. So from this point in time, and I'm going to do a little save, because why not? It's always safe to be saving. This is where things get a little bit heavier. In real time, it'll look a little bit laggy, but keep in mind, it's calculating a lot of calculations all at once. It's doing the simulation, it's reacting with all of the items, and then it'll be meshing it. So this is the final step to creating your water. If I put a mesh on the item and hit play again, that'll take the fluid, and you'll see this looks a little bit different. It's a little bit lumpy to start, but you can see now this starts to look like real water. And of course, you can see it's a little bit jumpy, it's a little bit slow, but this kind of real-time feedback was close to impossible. There's a few other ways to do it, but remember, from all that we've seen so far, this is completely still changeable at any point. We can come back to our main camera. We can switch off our cones if we don't like this creative choice that we made. And it's all still playing back relatively quick on a quite dated laptop, yeah. So it's pretty cool. You could maybe change this into a font at some point and write your name if you could think of a way to do it, or it could be the new logo for your company or something. So let's work a little bit on our mesh, and we will enable our cones again, and we'll turn them off so they're not visible. We'll work solely on our first tube, just so we get our fluid right, and we'll turn off our second emitter. So now we're looking just at one, and we're back to working just that little bit quicker, and I'll make sure I'm out of my camera. So this is our first tube, and now we're back to working quite quickly, quite fluently. We can go into our mesher, and we can start changing all the parameters throughout all of RealFlow. Now, it would, of course, be wise to change your fluid and emitters as you go if you know exactly what you're after. But like I said, if you're trying to create that unique kind of liquid that you want, if you want it to look more like gel, if you want it to look more like syrup, milk, or anything, then you'll know the attributes that you're trying to create. So at any stage that you're comfortable making those things, that would be when to tweak it. So we have lots of options. The options that I'll start with first, of course, are in the mesher. If I go in, the first thing you'd maybe try and do is to smooth the mesh. And of course, each time we need to restart our simulation. And it's coming down this pipe. It looks a little smoother. Of course, it's all still quite lumpy. It doesn't look like a typical liquid. If we speed up the liquid then, and we come into our speed just here, we'll give it 400. So we have speed and gravity affecting it quite well. You'll start to see it tries to come together a little more. And then at the same time, we'll try and cheat a little bit and give it a little bit more of a radius. And hey, we're getting a little bit closer. Now we're still working down here at at the default low resolution. That's so, it's default so that you could start working very, very quickly and keep it going that way. If I then switch this to medium, we'll start to see things slow down, but we're getting a little bit closer to what we'd like our fluid to look like. And then we have the ultimate thing, and if anybody has used RealFlow, you'll know this is the ultimate. If we start changing our resolution and increasing the resolution, everything starts to slow down, but everything starts to look a little bit more like the fluid we'd like. And then we'll increase our smoothing just a little more. We'll increase our radius just a little bit more. And these are these are ways to cheat and create very fast liquid in a motion graphics sense. These are not about realistic water. It's not about the absolute perfect water that would work with your massive CGI movie or anything like that. This is for quick motion graphics, for all the titles and the intros and trailers and things that, well, Maxon are famous for, being able to create in. So that's looking a little bit thicker, a little bit more pasty. If we come out now to our main camera, and I'll save, of course. So there is our fluid, looking it breaks up quite nicely. It still looks a little lumpy here, but for the sake of this demonstration, I'll not get too risky of increasing our settings too much, because you can, of course, go a little bit too far whenever you're trying to do this kind of thing live. So there's a nice safe point for us. And of course, our cone is making this beautiful sort of explosion of water. If nobody knew the cone was there, you would think, goodness, that's cool. That looks like an explosion of water. So now that we have our fluid looking quite okay, we can turn back on our second emitter. And there we go. Now, of course, at some point, it gets just a little bit too hard to work with. So this will look beautiful. But of course, you can see it's a little stuttery. It's working very hard because there's millions of calculations going on while it's creating millions of polygons of geometry. And that's just pretty as is. I think we're done. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Cool. So the next step then, to try and get a little bit of responsiveness back, if you've got to this part and you think, I'm happy with that looks quite good, the next thing would be to do is a thing called caching. If anybody has done any simulating work before, we need a cache, because obviously when we scrub our timeline to try and do a little bit more work or add some lights, this is only a simulation. It's only from we hit the first frame that it's able to calculate all of the things it needs to, one frame after the other. So we have to go back and we have to create a cache. And of course, there's an incredible cache system put into RealFlow. It's an absolute must. So if I come back and if I go into today, and we'll make ourselves a little folder. I'll copy this directory and we'll pop it straight into the cache directory. There we go. Now I can hit cache right now and it'll work quite quickly. You'll even notice the point in time whenever it hits the pipes, it'll start to work that a little bit harder. But I'm going to cancel this because there's one little trick and one amazing feature that I think it might go unnoticed. So I'm going to make sure that people know about this. There's a little thing down here called GPU, graphics cards in 3D land, and they're using things like Octane render and the Unreal Engine. Things are becoming way more real time with parallel processing. So RealFlow, right from the get-go, have included the ability to render on AMD and NVIDIA graphics cards right from the start. Of course, my laptop, it has two graphics cards, so I can pick one of those graphics cards. And if your workstation at home or in the office has a really nice graphics card, this will be a lot faster. We perhaps on this system won't see just that much increase, but certainly whenever it gets down to the very complicated calculations with simulations and interacting with objects, it will definitely help this process. So I think already it's just that little bit quicker. So we'll wait a wee second and I'll take a drink. At any point, we could cancel this simulation. We could hit cancel, and it will have given you all of the simulated frames up until the point that it's finished. So you can see now it's starting to work very, very hard. So I'm sure that's both pipes working at their max potential. I think our scene looks like a plumber's nightmare. We can come up with a backstory to where the water came from. So. Need some elevator music. As soon as this process is done, you'll notice that our scene goes instantly back to real-time feedback. You can pan the camera around while the scene's playing. No longer is it a simulation. It'll be just so fluent and so fluid. You can then start you'll see next we'll start applying our materials, and we'll have a little look at Octane and see how it looks when it's rendered. Of course, at any stage, you can go back into RealFlow and then start tweaking and really fixing some of the settings if you wanted just to look that a little bit more realistic, or you change your mind. These pipes are just, to serve chocolate, instead of water. So. And nearly at the finish line. And this is 150 frames, which is pretty respectable. Previous simulation times would have, if anybody's used RealFlow before, they would have been that little bit bigger because there's a lot more calculations. This all has been optimized to work inside of Cinema 4D, and I think this is us. Here we go. Thank you for waiting. We are back, and we have our tubes and things. And if I hit play, you'll notice that we are back to real-time feedback. What we have simulated and cached out has created all of our cache files for every frame. Of course, on a nice, powerful GPU from NVIDIA or AMD, that will work a lot quicker. So let's get back to our main camera. Yeah, not too bad. Okay, so we can now start looking at things like textures and things like that. One little final step, and it's kind of more of a, it's not so much of a creative step, it's more a sort of, let's try and fix these pipes from floating. They're floating in midair, so that won't make too much sense. We have this beautiful black backdrop, which is from a crowd called Thinking Particles. They have an Octane render kit. There's a few others as well out from guys like Brograph and things like that. They have a few plugins to help make all this process quicker. I'm sure you guys don't want to have me make all these things on stage, so we can change this wall to a little thicker and bring the whole thing forward. So this will be our wall at the back of our pipes. And this is only to bring in that little aspect of realism then. So if we go into our front view, we can start making little cylinders very quickly. We'll change them over to this so they're facing us. We'll knock these down to a sensible size, so maybe about 15. We'll pop these up, and if we just holding control, quickly duplicating them around, and we'll place them where we're looking, and they'll look like little fixtures that are holding the pipes. We'll obviously see these through the glass. Cool. Okay. And if we come back to our main view, they're obviously quite wrong, so let's take them all and we'll shift them back into space. And this will get us to a finished, nice looking render. So if I take them one at a time and just place them where they have to be placed. Now, of course, these won't affect our simulation because our simulation has been baked in. Anything that we put in the path of the water flowing, it won't upset. So it doesn't matter that we're too accurate with these, as long as we think they're going to look well or look right in the right place. So for example, this one's going through, that's fine, that's perfectly okay. This one here isn't working very hard. Let's make him work a little harder, and we'll make it just that little bit longer. And of course, the fact that they're popping out the back, we'll not see that, so that's perfectly fine. Now, from the front, that doesn't look too noticeable, but remember, we'll be popping glass onto these, so you'll see through, and it gives that a little bit more realism. It's kind of, with doing this every day, you kind of want to look for little cheats, for things like this that adds that little sense of realism back. So I'm going to grab some of my favorite materials. It comes along with the same pack for the lighting kit. And we have some things we'll need. So these are metals that I'm very fond of using. We'll use some steel, why not? We'll use some translucent materials. We'll try jello. That's one of my favorites. Just as a backup, we'll drag out water. And we need some glass. I like to work from frosted glass because at some point we can pull back how frosted it is, but still having that little bit of frost on it is a good thing. So let's add our glass to our tubes. And you can tell I'm a messy worker. I haven't cleaned up any of this, but like I said, the goal is to work fast, because if you're doing one of these every day, the trick is speed. So if I drop the jello that I'm so fond of, and we go into our jello settings, and let's pick a frame. So there's our jello. Now, at any point as well, you'll see that our liquid has come out of the pipe. We can correct for that on the fly by moving our cached frames just up a little bit and things like that. These are the sort of little cheats that we like to do. to make our renders just work that a little bit faster. So we'll go with that for now. And we'll scale this down just ever so slightly to help it fit. Again, if something is wrong, working very quick to correct is probably the goal. So a little bit smaller and move it back up. Okay. Cool, that'll do, that's close. Let's go to our jello. And I would like a sort of bluish jello, a bluish tinge. There's our blue. Cool. And now this is time for Octane. We talked about GPU things before. This is a real-time render engine on the left. And my laptop, of course, will struggle through. But you can see now we're seeing real-time the feedback from our lights and things like that, and what our end water simulation looked like. We can, within reason, scrub on through and pick a different frame. And our render on the left will catch up. There we go. We can come out of our camera and change a few things, which is pretty cool. So one of my favorite things to do on Octane is to load an HDRI image. This is only being rendered by 3 separate lights here on the sides, which are quite white and quite bright. So let's try and make our water look that a little bit more realistic. If I go in here, one of my favorite HDRIs is from one of the HDRI labs, and there it is. It's a tunnel system, and I use this HDRI all of the time. And you'll see it appear on the left. It's quite simply just a tunnel system with lights at both ends. So there's a light at that end. There is a light at this end. And the trick then is to line up so that the light hits the side of the render, which is already set up. So we can, of course, go in and we can rotate this. And all of the light in this HDRI then is light in our scene, which means we can probably afford to turn off 1 or 2 of our spotlights. So let's try, we'll turn off our right one. We'll turn off our left one. And let's have a look and see how that looks. And on the left, you'll get a little impression of where we are. That's pretty cool. And Octane will start to clean this up slowly but surely. So let's tweak the render settings just a little bit, and we'll start to see it a little bit quicker. Cool. You can already have a rough idea of what the photorealism will look like. Again, in your office or your workstation at home, you'll have a lot more powerful graphics cards, so all of this simulating and rendering will go a lot quicker. We have to remember to drop our steel onto our pipes and things like that, but that's really where that render goes. One final step then, and I'll open Photoshop. We'll obviously not wait for Octane to render a frame and make it look tidy and clean. Of course, in here you have things like all your camera settings and depth of field, which is an amazing Octane feature. But so our water is looking quite good. If we come in, and I have one that I prepared earlier. Here's our render. One thing on this, so in the last month and a half, I've started using a free Photoshop plugin called Nik Collection. And of course, it's like Instagram or any of those kind of things that applies filters. So this is one final step then to make our render look that a little bit more tidy or cool, because our render is looking just a little bit too clean for my taste. So we can pick a beautiful starting point and see which we like. So for example, we could start with this. It's a little bit much, but let's go in and tweak it and pull it back. This is really just a great look at how RealFlow now is integrating into these kinds of workflows. It could be an advertisement for a washing detergent or for a drink or anything, and you can integrate all that into your same motion graphics workflow then. And then, of course, this is just the final stages of what you'd like to achieve, really, with all of the plugins and applications that I've showed here. We'll add some light leaks, because who doesn't like light leaks? And in the end, you come out looking kind of like this. We'll choose our film type. These are kind of like our filters. We'll choose one we kind of like. We could warm it up. We could go very, very, very faded. And there's subtle ones and things like that. So let's land on this one. We'll add some more dirt back in, because, yeah, it'll make it look like it's been taken with a real camera. And one final color grade. And cool. We have a finished render that would be done, that has only been done in 1 hour. Of course, if you have a little bit more time, you can increase the quality and help the realism and anything that you would notice that would be a little bit wrong with it. You could add more things in to interact with the water. And as I said, tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'll be looking more closely at demons and how we can interact with the water directly rather than using objects and things like that. So, thank you very much. Any questions? Yeah. And the plugin. So his question was, just for the live stream, what's the biggest difference between the full RealFlow and the plugin? Well, the difference is speed, really. It's integrated now into the program. You'll remember from previous, maybe you know from previous workflows, you would have a full application called RealFlow. You would simulate, which is also a process that would take a long time. You would then have to import your objects into RealFlow to have anything that would interact with ships or any objects that you would have. For example, if we were to use these cones or the pipes, we would have to take that all into RealFlow as a mesh. It would then interact with it, and then you'd have to export it out of the full RealFlow again. The main difference really now is this can all be done inside of Cinema. So, sorry? Yeah.
Test. Yeah. How about motion blur? Is that compatible?
Well, for myself and motion blur, there's actually a motion blur setting on the mesher, and you can change the motion blur strength. That'll work directly with Cinema 4D's motion blur.
And Octane.
And Octane, yes, I was going to say. My workflow is all Octane now, so it's lucky that I know that's there. But you can add your Octane motion blur as well. It works quite well. So. Cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or?
Would you be able to render out a motion vector pass if you weren't using Octane?
You can, yeah.
In After Effects?
Yeah, you can. This meshing process that we've done has created Cinema 4D geometry. It's nothing special. It's just the special element of it is it's working very, very light in its feet compared to previous importers and meshers, you know, because the guys have worked very hard at making that work internally in Cinema. It's for me, technically, and from all the years ago, I opened RealFlow 1 and even opened Cinema 4D in the first time. The fact that mesher is able to work almost in real time, or maybe real time on a better system, it's amazing, you know, so that's cool. Any other questions, guys? Cool. Well, thank you very much for checking this out. I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. and we'll look at being a little bit more violent with water and simulations, and we'll see what sort of abstract things we can create. Thank you.